Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth and successful group practices just like yours. Hold on. I can't use the same intro I use every week. And why is that? Because today's kind of a big deal. So we're going to start again. Welcome to episode 250 of the Group Practice Accelerator podcast. That's 250 episodes, 250 opportunities you've given us to bring you resources and education around building and growing and even selling your group practice. And while I'm proud to say that I now have the privilege of being the host, this show's success certainly didn't start with me. It began back in 2021 with a vision and a desire to help entrepreneurs just like you. And we couldn't be more grateful that you let us into your homes and cars and offices every week. So today is not only a milestone episode, it's also the start of a new chapter for Polaris. You're going to notice a bold new look, and it's a brand that reflects the clarity and growth that we help our clients achieve. So same team, same mission, but an exciting new identity as we look ahead. So to celebrate this 250th episode, I've invited the team to join me, Diwakar Sinha, our founder and CEO, Aidan Bradley, our fractional COO and strategic consulting executive, and Mark Flock, our partnership and equity solutions executive. And we have some special things we want to share in this episode because without your success, your growth, your trust in us, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. So let's get to it. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Hey Jamie, thanks for having. I do want to add, there are some audience members that do listen to us on treadmills and bikes and while working out. So I know we've replaced 90s alternative music for them, EDM, house music. Like our tone and podcast is so exciting. They're taking the podcast over EDM, and that's getting them to do the bench press of like 250, right? Or the squats that they're looking for. Like our tone reflects that extra push, that extra set. So I'm really excited about that.
How many beats per minute do I have to keep this? I feel like that's a lot. Well, it's good to see everybody smiling on the podcast here, and we're happy to celebrate that. But as I said, this podcast goes way back. We've got some longevity, and that's what I really want to take some time to honor today, because that comes from our clients. It comes from the feedback they give us, the questions they send us, and the work that you all have done with them. So I want to make sure that we properly highlight that and talk about that in today's episode for our clients so that they can kind of learn from that success and maybe go back to some old episodes too. So Diwakar, I'm going to start with you. So when this podcast first launched, what did you hope it would do for group practice owners? Like where was your mind at with it?
Yeah, so I think when we launched it, we wanted to just educate the market, right, on how to build, scale, and exit their group practice successfully. And we felt providing a cadence of some content, changing content that would be 20 to 30 minutes that they could listen on their way to the office, way home. As I just said, maybe at the gym, they're trying to get their workout in, that people could digest, what would be impactful and meaningful to the success of their practice. And that's really what we've tried to do in the last few years.
Yeah, you've created a really solid community around it as well. We have tons of subscribers, people that download this every single week and listen to it. So we're pretty proud of that fact. And you've come a long way with it. And you said 20 to 30 minutes. And I have to call out here that Aidan and I consistently go 40 to 45. So we can be a little long-winded at times, but it's good.
Operations is tactical, right? So and I'm going to come to your rescue, Aidan. Operations is tactical.
We have a lot to talk about. How about that?
Aidan's the one outlier too. It's not you, Jamie.
Right. Why use 2 words when you can use 10?
Exactly.
So they go over, right?
We've never heard that before. Well, and this one's also for you, Diwakar, and guys, feel free to jump in here. Like, how do you see the podcast has evolved since it started back in early 2021? That's going to be a different perspective for each of you, I think.
Yeah, so I think, early stage when we started on the podcast, it was mostly Perrin, and then me. on the podcast.
Mhm.
And over time, as we evolved that, we wanted to make this, as we give our clients guidance about scaling, we wanted to scale the podcast. And so over time, it became about the team, about industry speakers. So as we evolved into 23 to 24, we started to bring in Aiden and Mark as subject matter experts,
Mhm.
to the market on that. So I think that evolved. And as we're going into 2025, we've started to add more industry experts on top of the team into the content we bring in to be able to provide more insight on a macro level as guidance to our client base and our listener base.
Yeah, this has been sort of an evolution, I'm sure, that you've watched progress over these couple of years, but several years now. What surprised you most about that growth?
Yeah, what surprised me most is that a lot of people, when we go to trade shows or events, just automatically recognize, like, oh my God, you guys are the Group Practice Accelerator. You guys are the Polaris guys. So I think that, in some aspects of it, it's really exciting to be noticed for the content we're providing. Our podcast is listened to internationally. So it's in different, not just countries, different continents as it goes. Our base of downloads and listens is every single quarter improving quarter over quarter. So I think that's also meaningful that people are listening to our information and sharing that information. So the message is getting out there that it is actually providing impactful guidance to the market. So I think that's been really positive feedback for us to get that what we're doing in the market, people receive it well, and they're expanding it with their friends.
Aiden, you look like you have something to add.
No, I'm just, as I'm listening, I'm reflecting on, for me, I can't believe it's been 250 episodes already. It just, it's gone by so quickly, and we bring in so many different folks outside of Polaris, as DeWalker mentioned, as subject matter experts, where they bring in an element of information that some group practice owners that are starting to emerge are starting to see some of the machinations needed outside of just the dentistry, and we actually work outside of dentistry and some other medical practices like plastic surgery, legal aspects, legal experts, distribution experts, accounting experts, and it always elicits a response from a lot of our listeners because we get instant feedback often, not only just on LinkedIn when we post it, but often we all get texts like, hey, great episode. It sounded great. Can we chat? And to me, that's a really great kind of unscientific way to know that we've hit a nerve.
Mhm.
And we get those often. So I often know that we've had a really good podcast because I start getting some questions like, hey, can we talk? So just as we're talking, going down memory lane here, I'm just reflecting on all the conversations and people that we've had on the show, and obviously brings a smile to our face. So I'm looking forward to the next 250.
I am too. Well, and like I said, being the newbie to the group as of last year and to the podcast just this year, I don't have insight to some of those stories. Yeah, I can go back and listen, but it's different hearing it from you all and gives me a different perspective too. And what I hear from people after the podcast is, they like to hear the engagement with you all as subject matter experts, in addition to the guests that we bring on. But you're the ones that are out there in practices, in groups, helping doctors do what they do best so that they can grow and experience that lifestyle that they want to experience too. So you guys deserve some credit here that probably does not get called out enough. So thank you. So speaking of memory lane, Aiden, you brought this up. I'm going to pose this question first to Mark. Are there some moments or some episodes that stand out to you as turning points for the show or some other experience that really stands out in your mind?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on what Aiden just last said is I noticed kind of for the first couple of years it was extremely good content and just education, at a high level, maybe mid-level, and I feel like in the last maybe 9 to 12 months, at least with partnerships and in some of the other episodes I know Aiden and Dwalker have done as well, is like really getting into the weeds, with those particular topics and like taking it 2 steps further, 3 steps further, and that has warranted a lot of calls and emails. Especially, I want to say the partnership conversations that you and I, Jamie, had towards the end of 2024 and some ones that we had at the beginning of 2025 was a huge spark on phone calls and emails that I received. And it was just really just going over partnership considerations. And we have a grid that we've created in the past, kind of going through, buy-ins versus both earn-in type of models and like what works best for particular practices and their strategy, their vision, their current situation, their future situation. That sparked a lot of like I need to give Polaris a call because I need to understand where I'm at, where I'm going, and what fits best with my practice. So, I mean, Q1 of this year and even rolling into Q2 was just, I was buried with phone calls because of those probably 3 podcast episodes that we did, Jamie. And that's kind of, it was enlightening to see just doctors like they know where they're at, kind of where they want to go, but they're not sure how their doctors and the longevity of keeping those doctors are part of that strategy long term. So it was great to see, at least from a partnership perspective.
Yeah, for sure. DeWalker, what about you?
Yeah, man, I think for me the episodes that stands out is really when we started to talk about clinical development, clinical coaching, and driving any new product or service. When we started offering partnership pathways, early in our process in 2021, 2022, and breaking that down. I think that was an exciting journey to kind of launch a new process, educate the market, and really see the transformation of how the market receives it and the questions we get back from it. So anytime we have something we dive into new that we educate the market on has been amazing for me.
Good. And Aiden, you mentioned earlier feedback from listeners. Any success stories you want to share related to that?
Yeah, I thought hard about this, and we've had a few, and we've developed so many great relationships with the clients, past and present. Let me lead in by saying that what we found, or at least what I particularly found, getting out of my comfort zone, doing these podcasts, especially with you, Jamie, and prior with DeWalker and Perrin, is really getting out of our own way and giving the listeners, what I would say, solutions and not pep talks, right? So let's kind
Good
of
point.
set the table there. We collectively have become more intentional in being candid while offering not only what we do and our ability to help them, but getting our listeners to understand, or for them to give us what their vision is. And some really don't have a vision. They're just stuck, right? So through a series of questions and probing, we can get to them what they're really looking to do, where their passions are. And that brings a lot of, I think, personal and professional satisfaction for us when we can help. So to answer your question specifically, this was a really tough one for me. And I think it's a tough one for the whole Polaris team. The one because of the end result, unfortunately, but I go back to, we began about a year and a half ago doing a series called The Life Journey. And what we want to do is we brought on several clients, past and present, that talked about their early days, right? Everybody thinks that success comes quite easily, and they don't hear the backstory, the going without pay, the having to mow the lawn between lunch hours, everyone got, everybody got their bills taken care of but them. And the one that we had was a gentleman who was in partnership with his wife, that talked about their early beginnings of a group practice and how they struggled getting associates, they struggled getting profitable, they struggled getting quality team members, and they listened to TED Talks and other books, and nothing seemed to resonate. And they came to a master class, and they just decided, we are just going to rip the Band-Aid off here. We're going to start fresh. And we are going to start doing things the right way, because what we're doing is not right. And what they did was they shed off some unprofitable practices. They engaged Polaris. They attended a master class with us, and we spent probably 2 years working with them, and then actually working outside of Polaris with them. And they continue to scale and grow and build a really good group practice. And unfortunately, that owner passed recently in a tragic accident. And I say that because through his journey, he was able to set his organization up that it can still continue on, his legacy and what he wants to do. And I thought long and hard about whether or not I want to share that story. But the reason I do is that podcast probably elicited the most text and emails to me that I've gotten from any podcast that we've ever done. It really, really struck a nerve. And it made me think, what more outside of operations and profitability and all the cash flow and all the things that we try to help our clients with? One of the things that can easily be overlooked is what happens when the unforeseen happens.
Exactly.
So for me, that was a real inflection point for me about the value that we provide that may not even been part of the original engagement or plan. So I think for me, some of our listeners may know who that is, but that was an impactful podcast, and it becomes more impactful today, seeing what has transpired since then. And for all intents and purposes, we keep in very close contact with the group still, and they continue to thrive. So that was a success story to begin with, and even through an absolute unforeseen tragedy, it's continued on to be able to excel and carry on with their vision.
Yeah, and from what you've said to me, just such an impactful human being and really created a legacy and created with you and created it the right way. So that's a good story to share. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, Mark, how about you?
Yeah, a little bit different. I think if I had to think of a success story that came out of the podcast, there was a listener that probably listened for about a year and a half. Finally gave me a call and was talking around partnerships with them, and they had a handful of associates, handful of locations in the Midwest, and was able to create a solution specific for them. As you know, within partnerships, you hear me talk, everything is customized for your situation, your current position, where you plan on being in the future, what your associates are kind of expecting or executives are expecting. So nothing is cookie cutter in what we do, nor do I recommend a cookie cutter approach because no business is alike. It's kind of how we see it. So created that solution, rolled it out to all the associates, and they had a collections goal or hurdle to hit. And it was kind of funny. It happens often, actually. And in that presentation, they were all questioning their ability to exceed that collections threshold or that number, for the earned and equity model. And I explained a handful of different ways on how that's actually achievable. And then a year later, we did the cap table for them. 4 of the 5 associates, with the exception of the one who was brand new, exceeded their last year's collections numbers by over $250,000.
Wow.
And mind you, that was 5 individuals saying, I cannot go any higher than where I am. You put something in front of them and you see amazing results. Now, have to give a disclaimer that this doesn't work like that every single time, but things like that can be motivating, can incentivize people, can draw out something in their inner abilities to want to do more. And that was the perfect example. They were only been a client of ours for maybe a year and a half at this point, but they were listening to our podcast for over a year when they actually engaged with us and got a phone call, and we set it up right away. And that was a success story that actually happened earlier this year. I think that was, I mean, I see that all the time, maybe not, 250 plus across the board for multiple people, but they were ecstatic. They exceeded what they projected in that first year as a company, which means that, the owners were the real winners at the end of the day, but the associates got a piece of that and everyone was happy. It was a very fun cap table update and an award of stock or shares to those individuals because of that situation. So always enjoy doing those, always enjoy having those educational conversations up front with clients because you never know what can happen, and enjoy formulating those type of situations and hopefully receive those results. So that would be my story, I'd say, Jamie, if you had asked me for one of them from this year.
Yeah, that we're all motivated by different things, right? And it sounds like you found the exact thing that works for them, and I imagine many others as well. So good to see that growth. DeWalker, what's a good example from you?
Yeah, so I think for me, we had a client in the past that kind of was our life cycle for our client overall. Initially engaged us for consulting services, and unfortunately, they went through a business divorce, had a partnership
Mm,
that broke apart, and that causes a lot of anxiety and uncertainty for people
yeah.
in the market. That's not only a disruption to the business, but there's disruption personally because there's a lot of uncertainty around what the path forward looks like, and also for the team, right? Because they're trying to figure things out. Working with the client, we were able to repurpose the process moving forward. When the partnership breakup happened, I think his net worth and that practice was negative a few million dollars. Negative few million dollars. I'll restate that in case
Ouch.
my
Ouch.
my words are a little fast on a podcast. And if somebody's doing a squat, they can do a negative squat, or negative press. Those are harder on a bench press, negative presses. Um, so and we were able to take that business from a negative equity position to transacting well into the eight figures on that deal, a period of like 24 months, 30 months
Wow.
from start to finish. So really, it showed the ability of the client to stay focused to their purpose, their mission, the fortitude they had, and our ability to work with them to help them deliver their outcome in that process to a successful exit.
Oh, what a huge difference. It's definitely a success story. Well, we're not stopping at 250 episodes, that's for sure. So, DeWalker, this is to you. If we're looking into the future, how do you see the podcast tying back to our bigger mission of helping doctors and owners build and scale?
Yeah, so I think to the core aspect of it, we still want to educate. I mean, I think our purpose to educate the market is going to remain the same. I generally, the feedback we get, and Jamie, you get, is that people want to continue to learn more. In the market's evolving, right? So we want to stay current with the market. We've done podcasts around market conditions, capital conditions, things like that. So I think the core of it, educate the market. Beyond that, we do see ourselves going in a little more deep dives in some episodes and kind of unveiling how some things need to be looked at in an operating agreement or a growth strategy or a transaction event, and really educating the audience members on that one thing they might be thinking about that is something that's causing them a challenge that we can kind of pick on a top FAQs and put it on a podcast. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is bringing industry experts to our podcast that are in the market, whether they're attorneys, CPAs, distribution companies, design firms that provide a service to the space, and that could say, okay, if you do this way, here's how it impacts your business, right? Really kind of break down guidance into it, into that process. So obviously, the next 5-7 years, continuously again focusing on education and diving deeper into that mission and purpose.
Well, I'm ready. We can get into the details with future episodes, and it seems to be the feedback that I get as host is people want to hear more about those details that all of you touched on today. And I know that your work and your stories that you bring here, that relatability to our listeners is really critical, because I know right now that there's somebody listening to this podcast that is struggling with something that you have helped another client with. And unless we include that portion of how did we get from point A to point B before we get to point C, if we leave that portion out of it, we're missing out on part of the story, because there's struggle behind growth always. And you all do this beautifully when helping clients. So I'm grateful to all of you, grateful to all of our listeners, and appreciate having you here today.
Thanks for having us.
All right, well, here's to the next 250, right? All right. And to our audience, thanks for celebrating 250 episodes and our new look with us. This is just the beginning, so keep an eye out for our brand new website launching October 15th. As always, if you want to connect with us, send us questions, suggestions, things you want to hear about, topics, just send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber for these last 250 episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next 250. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go ahead and share this with a colleague. and leave us a rating on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.